welcome to Crystal Walters' podcast. Today we have an amazing guest. Her name is Tricia Griffin. She is a licensed menopause professional and a corporate educator. Tricia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's a pleasure. Will you share about what it is being a licensed menopause professional and corporate?
Sure. So I spent 20 years in corporate leadership before I went through menopause myself, and that transition completely changed everything for me. It just made it impossible for me to tolerate the things that I'd been accepting for years. The toxic work environments, the constant people pleasing, and living according to everyone else's expectations. Menopause removed that ability for me to be able to override my body's wisdom. So I left corporate, I sold my house, I bought a fifth wheel, and spent a year essentially decompressing from decades of climbing the corporate ladder while ignoring what I actually needed. And during that time, I realized that I needed more than just symptom management. I needed a complete life redesign. And that's when I got formally trained as a licensed menopause champion through the Menopause Experts Group. They're out of the UK. And this last year, I earned my Menopause Pro designation. That's a chosen group of women in the field, and we come together in a round table, and we have discussions about menopause and what it means and all of the good things. And so now I work in two distinct ways. I coach individual women through what I call their permission season, using menopause as the catalyst to intentionally redesign the second half of their lives. And then I work with companies to shift their culture around menopause, because I've seen firsthand how many talented and experienced women are quietly exiting the workforce because no one's talking about this transition. But both aspects of my work come from the same place. I understand what it's like to be successful on paper, but completely unfulfilled internally. And I know that menopause is actually the permission slip that women have been waiting for to finally choose themselves.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah. All of us will go through it. It just depends on the severity of how we go through it. A lot of women have very intense menopause experience, and then I've talked to other women and they're like, this is great. I love it. No more periods. I feel great, and it's all fine and dandy. Most of us have some symptoms though.
Wow, I didn't even know that there's a possibility of not having symptoms.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of women, but I have talked to women who are just like, I wish I had menopause problems so I could work with you, but I just feel amazing. And I'm like, that's awesome.
What is the biggest misconception that you've had about menopause?
For me, honestly, because I'd never really learned about menopause, I really didn't know anything. I just thought you were old and that's when menopause happened. I thought it was about hot flashes and mood swings. And I thought myself, if I could just manage the symptoms, I'd be fine. What I didn't understand, and what nobody told me, is that menopause fundamentally changes your tolerance for things that don't serve you. I had a hysterectomy when I was in my 40s, and even the doctor really didn't tell me that much about it. I'd kept my ovary, so I didn't go into immediate menopause, but she just said, oh, you'll probably go into menopause 6 months early. That's all I got. So the formal training taught me about the biology, the hormones, the clinical frameworks, but my own experience taught me something deeper, and that's menopause is actually initiation. Your body is forcing you to stop performing and start choosing. The symptoms that everyone talks about, those are just messengers saying you can't keep living like this. So before I understood this, I thought something was wrong with me. Why couldn't I just power through it like I had done with everything else? And why was I suddenly so intolerant of my toxic job? My people-pleasing patterns, the constant accommodating. I thought I was failing at menopause. And it turns out that the intolerance was really my body's wisdom finally breaking through the decades of conditioning. And then, so the biggest misconception is that menopause is just something to get through, or survive. It's actually an upgrade. And I think there's a book called The Upgrade too that a doctor wrote about menopause. It's just, you have to be willing to listen to what your body's telling you.
That's amazing. That it's just stopping all the things that really isn't serving you at all. You never
Right.
thought of-
Yeah. We lose that tolerance.
Maybe we should have that sooner in life.
I agree, actually.
How does your approach differ when you're speaking to leadership teams as you educate companies and individuals versus working one-on-one?
So when I'm speaking to corporate leadership, I'm translating menopause into business language. So I'm not there to make them care about women's well-being as a moral issue. I'm there to show them the retention problem that they can't afford to ignore. So 1 in 4 women consider leaving their job because of menopause symptoms. And these aren't entry-level employees. These are your most experienced leaders, your institutional knowledge, and the steady hands. With companies, I focus on the systemic patterns that they maybe can't see from the inside. Why are your 45 to 55-year-old women suddenly retiring early? Why is your most senior female talent burning out? And what it's costing you to replace it. That 20 plus years of experience. This isn't a women's wellness issue, it's a business strategy issue. But when I'm working one-on-one with women, we're of course having a completely different conversation. She doesn't need me to convince her something is happening. She's living it. She needs permission to trust what she's feeling, validating that she's not failing, and a framework to redesign her life without blowing everything up. With her, I'm not teaching biology. I'm asking, what has become intolerable? What are you ready to choose? And what would your life look like if you redesigned it for you? The corporate work changes systems, and then the individual work changes lives, and both are necessary.
I agree. They're definitely important because if the woman doesn't know what women are going through for the menopause, like obviously the woman's not going to fully understand either, and it's
Right.
Really
And most women don't, and even when they go to their doctor, it's not recognized quite often because doctors have very little training on menopause, very, very little training on menopause.
That's so crazy to me because
I know.
we need to know both men and the women.
Yeah. I mean, there's starting to be a change because women are really starting to talk about it now, and you have a lot of celebrities that are starting to talk about it, and then you have not just female doctors, but they're more taking the lead on it, where they're really, saying like, we need to understand this. So it's definitely starting to be talked about a lot more.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned power through. How does that conditioning collide with perimenopause, and what's the cost if we continue to just power through that?
So it collides catastrophically, and the cost is so much higher than most women realize until they're in the middle of it. We have been trained our entire careers that success means overriding your body's signals. Exhausted, push through. Sick, power through. Overwhelmed, just manage it better. That strategy might have worked in your 20s, but perimenopause is your body saying not anymore. And I actually just talked to someone about this recently. It's like, I just can't power through anymore like I used to. Your biology won't let you override it anymore. You can't caffeinate your way through the insomnia. You can't push through the brain fog and expect the same performance. You can't suppress the irritability when your tolerance for dysfunction has evaporated. And the harder you try to power through, the worse it gets. But here's what is really insidious. When we keep trying to power through, we are internalizing the failure. We think, I'm not as sharp as I used to be. I'm not handling stress well. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this anymore. And we start planning our exit from our careers. We spent decades building, not because we want to leave. I mean, sometimes we do, but it's because we think we're failing. And the hidden cost isn't just that physical burnout. It's the talented women who leave. The expertise walks out the door. The leadership pipeline dries up, and the devastating belief that you peaked at, say, 45, and it's all declined from there. When actually you just need a different operating system, one that works with your biology, not against it.
That makes a lot of sense. So what are some practical shifts that could help women protect their energy without going through all of that? Like without differentiating their careers if they still want to pursue that?
Well, I think it's recognizing first, like what's happening, which isn't always easy because much of this we really have to do on our own. I know when I first started really having symptoms, I had a very high profile position and my hot flashes love to show up in meetings. And so I'd be presenting at this meeting and I'd just get completely flushed. I would forget my words. But what I did was I really started noticing these patterns that were happening. Like when I was in these high stress situations, I'd have these immediate hot flashes. So from that point, I could take some practical steps to help alleviate that through like stress reduction, because it was stress and anxiety. And if I got anxious, they just really exaggerated. So, you know, for every woman, it's very different. And so it really depends. But like some key things are really like sleep and getting really precise on like, I need to go to bed and I need to get up at these certain times instead of, you know, sitting on your phone scrolling and doing all this stuff while you're in bed. You know, it's not really helping. Another thing that I really struggled with was like brain fog. And so I would forget my words, and I still do this. I would forget a certain word. I would know that even in the meeting, I wouldn't be able to recall it. Something about that word would just stick. I would know the first letter, and that's still the case. I know the first letter, but I can't pull up the word. So I would just write these words down in my notepad. So like when I came to my meeting and I knew I was going to have to use that word, I would write it down. It's so, you know, it really depends. There's on the woman, because there are well over 40 symptoms that women in menopause struggle with, which I had no idea. I thought it was like hot flashes and brain fog and irritability, but there's really so much more to it. And it's really looking at your own life and what the symptoms are that you're going through. And then you can start a plan for how you, work through that.
That's amazing. So I know that women typically in the age range of 40 to 60 or high capacity achieving some of those menopause symptoms that show up that you can help women through. So like, how can you help them identify it instead of getting stuck?
So most women don't realize that a lot of the things that you're going through when you first start going through perimenopause, that starts in your 40s. People think like menopause does not, I don't even have to worry about that until like I'm 50 to 55. But like I can look back on my life now and realize that I had this massive hormone irregulation, that like I had rage, like things would just like blow me up. And so that's a big part about like why it's so important to me about educating and putting it out there, because women don't even know like what they're going through. I had no idea what all of those things were, and now that I've studied and I learned, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what it was. And even with my daughter, she is going to be 35 this year, and I'm thinking to myself, well, it's getting so close for her. Some women go into menopause in their 30s, which that's even more devastating for a woman, because we kind of think of that as like our peak time in life, and then here all of a sudden it could be something that is hereditary. You could have had to have surgery and gone into immediate menopause, and it's really devastating for women. So I think being able to have someone that you can go to or talk to, or how do you learn about it? Like, those are all like really important things. And the US is really kind of behind on this. Like, the UK is much more advanced than we are, I would say, in that regard, and a lot of other countries too.
That's interesting. Why do you think that the US is so far behind in identifying and helping women?
Well, it's probably a combination of things. We're very youth oriented in the US. And so, we want to have this forever young thing. And so women themselves don't even want to talk about it. The doctors aren't trained about it. We're still making jokes about it because it's easier to make a joke about it than it is to really have a discussion around it. And there's a lot of shame around it and embarrassment. I know when I first started realizing, like, oh, this is what this is, I was coaching at the time, but I did not want to talk about it. I thought, everybody's going to think I'm old and they're going to make fun of me. And if I start talking about this, and like, there's this real stigma to it. And it is starting to change. You have people like Halle Berry, who's starting to talk about it. I can't remember the other actress, but she was in Godzilla. She talks very openly about it. And then Tamsin Fadal, who was a New York news reporter, she's done documentaries on it. And now on LinkedIn, that's pretty much what she's got a podcast, and that's pretty much what she talks about the whole time. So it's and I got to speak with her when she was in Seattle back in October. She was part of an event that I spoke at. So it's just really the culture around it. And women in my age group now are just starting to say, we're not going to accept that anymore. It takes time, though, for things to change.
That makes sense. So when you went through your menopause period, you sold your house, you rebuilt your life. How can you help women distinguish between a necessary redesign versus a reactionary escape?
So this is a really good question, because I can answer it because I've done both. The first time I left corporate, I was intentional about it, but it came very fast. I'd known for a while that I wasn't really happy, but it was like all of a sudden, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And I started making this plan. I just knew I didn't want to do the corporate thing anymore. I knew I was going to build my business. I was already working on my certification and then master certification. And then I also am certified in functional nutrition. So I was working on that all while I was doing the corporate thing. So I left. I knew I was going to build my business, but I also knew that I wasn't ready to jump straight into it. I needed time to decompress after I'd been taking care of myself since I was 17. And my kids and, the family and all of that stuff. So I sold my house. I already owned a tiny home. So I moved in there. Then I bought my fifth well. And I took a year off to just breathe. And it was amazing. I did do some contract work at that time, but I went kayaking whenever I wanted. I hiked whenever I wanted. But after that year, I realized that I needed to get back to work. So I took a position with a company that was 2 minutes from my house, my tiny home. And I ended up being the GM of that company, multi-state company, but still small. And I thought, well, I can do corporate differently this time. Like I'm the boss, so I can make these changes. And I was building my business on the side while I was working. But that job ended up being very, very toxic. And when I started to question some of their practices, I got laid off. And that was at the beginning of December, so fairly recently. But I had already made an exit plan. I already knew I was going to leave. The layoff was like, fine, I was going to leave in 5 or 6 weeks anyways. So both times were intentional. The first time I knew I was building something new. I just needed space before I was ready. And then the second time I was already building while I was still working, and I had the date set for leaving. And like I said, the layoff just accelerated it. And I look at that as a blessing in disguise. So here's what I tell women now is that you get to be intentional when you need healing time first. Leaving doesn't have to mean you immediately start building. Sometimes the most strategic thing that you can do is give yourself permission to rest and decompress before you're ready. And then the key is knowing you're moving forward towards something, even if you need space to get clear. And it doesn't necessarily mean like making these big drastic decisions like I did, because most women are not going to want to do that. They may want to find different work, but it doesn't have to mean those things. You can do it within the framework of staying in your job and being more intentional and figuring out what works for you and what doesn't. And if you choose to leave, then you choose to leave, but you don't have to. But so here I am now, and I'm back to building my business full time. Obviously, the first time I left, I needed healing time before I could build. I thought I would be able to jump right into it, and I just couldn't. And then the second time I was already building, and both were strategic and they both were intentional. The difference between a necessary redesign and then the reactive escape isn't whether you leave, it's whether you're moving towards something, even if you need time to figure out what that something is.
I love that. Like being able to recognize you're taking the time to pause, to think, to process.
And usually we jump from thing to thing to thing. And I thought that's what I was going to do. I thought, well, I'm going to do all these things, but my body had different ideas about that. So I chose to listen, and it was a really amazing time.
That's fantastic. So good to
Yeah.
So what does confidence look like in the second half when it's no longer fueled by approval, productivity, or training?
So another really great question, because it gets at the fundamental shift that menopause forces. The confidence that we build in the first half, it was extremely validated. We felt confident because we were hitting our numbers, we got the promotion, we earned the approval, we proved that we could handle it all. But menopause kind of strips that away. You can't rely on productivity when your brain fog makes you forget what you're doing. You can't chase approval when you're too exhausted to perform. You can't run on adrenaline when your nervous system is already maxed out. So what's left? The confidence that emerges in the second half is different. It's not that I can do anything. It's that I know what I will and what I won't do. It's not that I need to prove myself. It's I'm done proving myself. And it's not derived from accomplishment. It's rooted in self-knowledge. I see this in my own life now. I'm confident about saying no to opportunities that don't align with me, even good opportunities. I'm confident about choosing rest over productivity. This has been a really big one for me lately, when my body needs it. But I'm also learning to recognize that sometimes it's not rest that I need, it's movement that I need. And so I've started doing a lot more walking. I'm confident about charging what I'm worth without having to justify it. Not because I earn some external credit, but because I finally trust my own authority. And that's exactly what I mean by permission season. You're not losing confidence during menopause. You're transitioning from borrowed confidence to your own, from performing confidence to embodying it. It's quieter, it's steadier, and it's so much more powerful. But you have to be willing to let go of the old version first.
That makes a lot of sense. And I love how you said it's trusting your own authority.
Yes.
You have that confidence in that you
right.
are who you say you are, and that you can do so much more.
Right. And we're really taught not to trust our own authority most of the time. We're taught to, kind of stay in line and do the things we're supposed to do and what we should be doing, even when inside we know, like, that's not right for me. So
I also loved how in the beginning you mentioned that menopause is an initiation, not a decline.
Mm-hmm.
So what do women need to do to let go and cross that threshold?
So it's initiating you into your own authority, into the version of you that's no longer performing for approval, no longer shrinking to fit expectations, no longer apologizing for taking up space. But to cross that threshold, You have to let go of the identity you built to survive in the first half. So for me, like, I learned to not shine in my family. So I tried to stay small and quiet. And, now that's thrown into the past. And I do realize that that's not my issue. It's somebody else's issue. And I do get to shine. And then the other thing that most women don't realize is that good girl conditioning that got you where you are. It's the exact thing preventing you from stepping into what comes next. So being accommodating, saying yes, not making waves, putting everyone else first, those strategies worked when you were building your career, raising your family, proving your worth. But menopause is your body's way of saying, we're done with that now. So what do you need to let go of? You need to let go of being liked by everyone, the fear of disappointing people, the belief that your value comes from what you produce, and then the story that choosing yourself is selfish. And that is a huge thing that we're taught as we're growing up. And so it's the performance of like having it all together, all of it. So what are you crossing into? I call it your fuck it season. The part of your life where you finally get, some people don't like it when I say that, but it kind of is. And it's the part of your life where you're finally getting to be authentic instead of acceptable, where you trust your own judgment more than other people's opinions, where you design your life according to your values, not society's expectations. And that's why I call it permission season. It's not because someone else is giving you permission. It's because you're finally giving it to yourself. The initiation is learning to trust that your desires matter, that your needs are valid, that you don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing yourself. But you can't step into that powerful self while you're clinging to what you had in the first half. So the threshold, it demands that you let go.
That makes a lot of sense. I love the way that you describe that, because it really does put menopause into positive light that we as women really don't know and don't understand until we come to a professional who has studied this.
Right.
Thank you so much for all that insight.
Yeah, I believe that we get to choose what this experience is. It doesn't mean that it's all fun, the things that we go through, because a lot of it is not, but we still get to choose what the experience is for ourselves and what we're going to make of it.
Thank you for that. For a woman listening who feels exhausted, unseen, or secretly afraid, this is the beginning of an end. What do you wish someone had told you at the beginning of that start?
Yes, so I wish that someone would have told me this isn't the beginning of the end. Everything you built in the first half, all that you're striving, improving, all that accommodating, that was the warm-up. And this is where your life really starts. I wish that someone told me that the exhaustion I was feeling wasn't my body failing me. It was my body refusing to keep living this life that didn't fit anymore. The feeling of being unseen, that's because you've been performing a version of yourself that isn't real. The fear that it's all decline from here, that's what culture tells us, because it doesn't know what to do with powerful, clear, unapologetic women. And here's what I know now that I didn't know then. You're living 30 to 40% of your life after menopause. That's not a sunset. That's an entirely new season. And you get to design it, not based on who you're supposed to be, but on who you actually are. The women that I work with, the ones who lean into this transition instead of fighting it, they're not diminished on the other side at all. They're amazing and powerful. They're unleashed. They're starting businesses. They're setting boundaries that their younger selves would have never dreamed of. And they're choosing adventure over safety, authenticity over approval, vibrant over perfect. I do a lot of hiking, and that's where a lot of women really become interested, because it's like that getting out there and that adventure side of things. So if you're in that place right now that you feel exhausted and afraid, I want you to hear this. Your body is not giving up on you. It's giving you permission permission to finally choose yourself, permission to redesign your life, permission to start living. This isn't the end. This is your permission season. And what comes next is entirely up to you.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. So, do you have any final remarks for the audience?
I do. So if you're listening to this and something I said resonated, if you felt that flicker of recognition, like, wait, maybe this isn't the end, I want you to know that your body's wisdom is breaking through, and pay attention to that. Next week, I'm hosting a permission season workshop on February 5th, where we're going to explore exactly what it means to rewrite the story on menopause, not as something to survive, but as the catalyst to finally design your second half of your life on your terms. If you want to explore that and see what it would look like, you can come join us. I'll provide the link and we can put it in the show notes. And whether you join me or not, I just want you to remember this. The culture will tell you that menopause is decline, that the best years are behind you, that you should be grateful for what you have and stop wanting more. Don't believe it. You're not declining. You're shedding, not ending. You're beginning. And this is exactly what your permission season is. So use it.
Thank you so much, Tricia. I really
Of course.
Again, reach out to Tricia. She has the link. It'll be listed below. And you can also reach her on Facebook at Tricia Lee, and we'll also have that posted.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.